So picture a massive, bustling city grid, millions of lights, constant electricity pulsing through the avenues, keeping everything running at top speed.
Right.
But then, almost imperceptibly at first, certain neighborhoods just start to brown out, the lights dim, the subways slow down.
The power grid is basically struggling to keep up with the demand.
Exactly. And nobody seems to know where the master switch is.
It's a system-wide energy crisis. And for a really long time, the engineers looking at this city grid completely misdiagnosed the problem.
Yeah, they assumed the issue was with the buildings themselves.
Right, rather than looking at the actual power source.
Welcome to this deep dive. Today, we are taking you straight into that power grid. But the grid we're talking about is the human female brain.
It is.
We are breaking down some absolutely fascinating research from neuroscientist Dr. Lisa Mosconi. Her work is fundamentally changing how we understand menopause.
Completely shifting the paradigm, yeah.
Our mission today is to shatter this archaic misconception that menopause is merely, an end to a woman's fertility.
Yeah.
We are going to reframe it for what it actually is, which is a massive neurological renovation project.
And this is incredibly relevant to you no matter who you are, whether you're a woman preparing for this phase, a spouse, a child, or simply someone fascinated by human biology.
Absolutely.
This is fundamentally about understanding how humans actually work. I mean, by 2025, 1 billion women will be in or past menopause.
1 billion.
Yeah, that is 1 in 8 people on the planet. This transition affects the inner circle of literally everyone listening.
Okay, let's unpack this, because right out of the gate, the most shocking finding from Dr. Mosconi's brain imaging research is that during this transition, brain scans show a 30% drop in brain energy levels.
30%.
A 30% drop. The scans literally go from bright reds and yellows to these dim greens.
The lights are actually turning down. And that data is revolutionary because of the medical history it finally confronts. For hundreds of years, medicine has actively ignored or dismissed women's pain and neurological symptoms.
Oh, big time.
It's baked right into our language. The very word hysteria, which we culturally associate with madness or irrational panic,
Right.
it literally comes from the Greek word for uterus.
Wow.
For centuries, when women reported cognitive disturbances, memory lapses, severe anxiety, it was just chalked up to them being wildly emotional or mentally unstable.
Like it was literally an issue with their reproductive organs making them crazy.
Exactly. So what this modern neuroimaging does is validate what women have been saying for generations. These symptoms are very real, measurable neurological changes happening inside the skull.
To really understand how those changes happen, we have to unlearn a 90-year-old medical mistake.
Yes, we do.
Back in the 1930s, scientists isolated estrogen and progesterone. And because they discovered them while studying reproduction, they just slapped the label sex hormones on them and called it a day.
Which was a massive oversight.
Totally. It wasn't until the late 1990s that brain scientists finally stepped in and realized, hey, these are actually crucial brain hormones.
They serve a multitude of functions that have absolutely nothing to do with having children.
Right.
And everything to do with maintaining an energetically active brain. Estrogen, specifically estradiol, is incredibly powerful.
Yeah.
To understand its role, we have to look at cellular metabolism. Your brain runs on glucose.
Yeah.
But the neurons can't just use raw glucose.
You have to convert it, right?
Exactly. They have to convert it into ATP, which is the cellular energy currency of the body. Estrogen is the catalyst that pushes your neurons to burn that glucose and make that ATP.
Wow.
It also increases blood flow, stimulates neuroplasticity, and boosts immune protection in the brain.
So instead of thinking of estrogen as the CEO of the brain, a better analogy might be the spark plug in a car engine.
I like that analogy.
Right, because the glucose is the gasoline.
Yeah.
You can have plenty of fuel sitting in the tank, but without the spark plug to ignite it, the engine isn't going anywhere.
Exactly. And during menopause, the brain loses its primary spark plugs.
Right, the estradiol production drops, and this much weaker estrogen called estrone has to take over.
Yeah, and the fuel's there, but the engine starts misfiring.
Yeah.
What's fascinating here is the sheer scale of that disruption. You have an ATP crisis.
An energy crisis.
Right. The neurons still have access to the sugar in the bloodstream, but without that strong estrogen sparking the reaction, they simply aren't burning it efficiently.
And that is the exact mechanism causing those brain scans to look greener and dimmer.
Exactly. And this energy crisis manifests in very tangible ways. Up to 62% of women experience brain fog.
62%.
Yeah, this is not just normal tiredness from a bad night's sleep. It is a fundamental rewiring of the neural pathways.
It's losing words, that tip of the tongue syndrome.
A feeling of being completely unmoored because the brain's structural connectivity is temporarily failing to transmit signals.
I mean, I always assumed a hot flash was just a body temperature thing,
Most people do.
like a minor circulation issue or something. But knowing about this energy crisis completely changes the context.
It really does,
The hot flash is actually the hypothalamus.
which is the part of the brain responsible for thermal regulation.
Right. It's freaking out because it doesn't have the estrogen fuel it needs to read the body's thermostat accurately.
The brain is quite literally changing its physical structure to adapt to a new fuel source. And the symptoms, the fog, the flashes, the insomnia, they're the friction of that rewiring process.
So if the brain is physically changing its structure, how long does a massive renovation like that take? Like, when are the lights actually dimming?
Well, we need to clarify the timeline because our societal vocabulary around this is incredibly sloppy.
Yeah, people just use menopause as a catch-all term.
Right. But there are three distinct stages. First is perimenopause.
Mm.
On average, this starts around age 47 and lasts anywhere from 4 to 7 years,
Sometimes longer.
sometimes longer. This
Yeah.
is the roller coaster phase. Hormones are fluctuating wildly day to day, trying to find a new baseline.
Which is why the symptoms hit their absolute peak here.
Exactly, because of that instability.
Then you have actual menopause, which is surprisingly brief.
It's literally just a single day on the calendar.
One day. It marks exactly 12 consecutive months without a menstrual period.
And after that one day, you enter postmenopause, which is the stage a woman will remain in for the rest of her life.
Which is often 30% or more of her total lifespan.
Yeah. And that timeline brings up a massive biological mystery. If you strictly follow Charles Darwin's theory of evolution, the primary biological purpose of life is to pass on your genes.
Right, survival of the fittest.
In the vast majority of animal species in the wild, the female dies shortly after her reproductive years end.
Oh, wow.
So Darwinism really struggles to account for human menopause. Why would a species evolve to live decades past its ability to reproduce?
Right.
The answer lies in a robust framework called the grandmother hypothesis.
And that makes a lot of sense when you think about human infants, because human babies are completely helpless for years.
They really are.
Like, a foal can walk hours after birth, but a human child needs constant, intense resources.
Exactly.
If a human mother kept having children late into her life, the physical risks of childbirth mortality would skyrocket.
Which would leave her existing helpless children highly vulnerable to starvation or predators.
So evolutionarily, it became a massive advantage for human women to outlive their fertility.
They redirect their immense biological energy away from the physical toll of reproducing and step into the role of caregivers and grandmothers.
Providing resources, gathered food, protection.
By doing that, they ensure the survival of their offspring's children. It is a brilliant, highly cooperative survival strategy for the species.
Okay, I understand the evolutionary advantage for the species as a whole, but so what does this all mean for us today?
Right.
If it is this brilliant master plan, why does the transition period feel like an absolute tornado for so many women?
Well, if we connect this to the bigger picture, you have to look at the difference between the destination and the journey. The postmenopausal state, the destination, is a remarkably stable evolutionary advantage. But the transition to get there requires intense systemic biological adaptation.
The rewiring.
Exactly. And our modern lifespans, combined with modern environmental stressors and diets, are highlighting this turbulent rewiring process in ways that earlier humans who lived vastly different lifestyles might not have experienced as prominently.
The timeline shows this multi-year window of intense vulnerability while the brain adapts. So what happens if the brain struggles to make that adaptation?
That's the critical question.
Because modern medicine has had such a blind spot regarding this transition, they miss some massive red flags, specifically the connection to Alzheimer's disease.
We culturally view Alzheimer's as a disease of old age.
Like something that happens in your 70s or 80s.
Right. But Dr. Mosconi's research emphatically demonstrates that Alzheimer's starts in midlife.
Which is terrifying. 2/3 of all Alzheimer's patients are women. And for decades, the medical community just shrugged and said, oh, well, women live longer, so of course more of them get it.
Which is just lazy science.
Seriously. But the brain imaging obliterates that assumption. If you compare a perimenopausal woman to a man of the exact same age, the woman's brain is already showing a significant increase in amyloid plaques.
Which are the hallmark proteins of Alzheimer's.
Yeah, the red flags are appearing right in the middle of this estrogen energy crisis.
because the brain's defense mechanisms are compromised without their usual fuel. And nothing proves the sheer neurological power of ovarian hormones quite like the tragic history of surgical menopause.
This part of the deep dive really got to me.
Up until 2008, it was standard medical practice during a hysterectomy to just remove a woman's perfectly healthy ovaries if she was done having children.
Just take them out.
Just take them out. The logic was entirely rooted in reproduction. They thought, you don't need them for babies anymore, so let's take them out to prevent any future risk of ovarian cancer.
They viewed an incredibly complex endocrine organ as totally redundant, which is terrifying when you realize the ovaries are the brain's main fuel pump. Removing them plunges a woman into menopause overnight.
With zero transition time.
Zero. Dr. Mosconi's team scanned women before their healthy ovaries were surgically removed and then scanned them again exactly 1 year post-surgery.
The results are staggering.
The results show actual gray matter shrinking and thinning in the brain in just 12 months.
And the medical establishment used to dismiss these brain changes in women as just normal aging.
Right.
But when you witness gray matter literally vanishing over a 12-month period following the surgical removal of the ovaries, it proves definitively that these structural brain changes are directly tied to the instantaneous loss of hormones.
The clinical fallout is severe.
It really is. Surgical menopause drastically increases the risks for dementia, Parkinsonism, and major depression because the brain is violently robbed of its estrogen fuel instantaneously.
Rather than being allowed to adapt gradually over several years.
Exactly.
I mean, hearing that gray matter can physically shrink is incredibly sobering.
It's a wake-up call.
Knowing these medical blind spots and knowing how vulnerable the brain is during this rewiring phase, what tools do we actually have? Like, you really have to become a biological prepper for your own brain chemistry.
You do. And preparation absolutely starts with lifestyle, specifically what we use to build our cells, which is our diet.
Okay.
The research points overwhelmingly to the Mediterranean diet. Eating a diet rich in legumes, leafy greens, and fatty fish provides the exact polyunsaturated fatty acids and antioxidants the brain desperately needs.
To maintain its structural integrity.
Right. And following this specific dietary pattern can actually delay the onset of menopause by up to 3 years.
Wow, giving the brain a longer, smoother runway.
Exactly.
Meanwhile, the standard American diet, which is heavy in sugary drinks and highly processed meats, that can trigger menopause 3 years early.
Plunging the brain into that transition before it's ready.
And we need to be clear about what the brain actually needs to thrive. People hear the brain is made of fat, so they assume they should eat a ton of dietary cholesterol.
Right, which is a big mistake.
Dietary cholesterol cannot even cross the blood-brain barrier. Your brain needs omega-3s to support the myelin sheath around your neurons. It does not need a plate of bacon.
Exactly. And alongside diet, sleep hygiene and caffeine intake are also paramount to protecting the brain during this window.
The caffeine thing.
Yeah, we tend to think of caffeine as a quick boost, but we totally ignore its half-life. It has a 6-hour half-life, but a 12-hour fall life.
Meaning
It takes 12 full hours for a single dose of caffeine to completely clear your neural pathways.
Okay, let me do the math on that, because thinking about this completely changed my afternoon routine.
It changes everything.
If you have a cup of coffee at noon to fight off the midday slump, half of that caffeine is still actively in your system at 6 p.m.
Yep.
And a quarter of it is still physically circulating in your brain at midnight.
And that remaining quarter is more than enough to disrupt your deep, slow wave sleep.
Which is catastrophic for long-term brain health.
Because deep sleep is the only time the brain's glymphatic system activates.
The power washer.
The neurological power washer, exactly. It flushes cerebrospinal fluid through the brain tissue to clear out toxins and metabolic waste products.
Including those specific Alzheimer's amyloid plaques we mentioned earlier.
Right. So if you miss that deep sleep window because of afternoon caffeine, those toxins are just left to accumulate.
Then there are the environmental toxins we have to prep against. Dr. Mosconi talks about being militant regarding removing plastics from the kitchen.
Yes.
Things like putting Tupperware in the microwave or the dishwasher.
Right.
When plastic heats up, it leaches industrial pollutants into your food.
And these pollutants bioaccumulate.
Meaning your body can't easily expel them.
Right. So they store up over time in your body fat. They are known endocrine disruptors.
Meaning they actively interfere with your hormone receptors, which is literally the last thing you need when your hormones are already fluctuating.
Absolutely. And physical exercise is another major pillar of defense against all of this. Moderate cardiovascular activity is incredibly effective at improving circulation to the brain.
reducing the frequency of hot flashes.
and mitigating brain fog.
Now, my immediate instinct hearing this is to overcompensate.
Of course.
Like, if exercise protects the brain, why can't I just hit the treadmill for 2 hours a day, do high-intensity boot camps, and literally force my body to out-train the menopause symptoms?
This raises an important question about the limits of physical stress. And the answer is no. You cannot out-train a fundamental biological transition.
Yeah.
There's an inverted U shape of exercise benefits here. If you over-exercise, your body perceives it as a threat,
So your cortisol levels spike.
which increases systemic inflammation, and your recovery time drastically lengthens, especially as estrogen levels drop.
So what's the sweet spot?
The sweet spot is moderate zone 2 cardio. You want to work out just hard enough to bring some pink to your cheeks.
Where you can still hold a conversation, but you couldn't easily sing a song?
Exactly. Consistency is far more protective for the brain than extreme intensity.
So lifestyle gives you a baseline defense. But what if you do everything right? You're eating the salmon, you toss the plastic Tupperware, you're sleeping well.
And the brain's internal fuel tank still runs completely dry.
Right. There has to be a medical intervention, which means we have to talk about hormone replacement therapy, or HRT, and the massive panic that derailed it.
To understand where we are now, we have to look at the deeply flawed history of that panic.
Yeah.
In the mid-20th century, estrogen therapy was actually a best-selling drug. It was widely prescribed to help women through the transition.
Right.
But in 1993, the Women's Health Initiative launched a massive clinical trial to study HRT's effects on preventing heart disease and dementia,
And then in 2002, they abruptly halted the study.
and triggered a global media frenzy, announcing that HRT caused an increased risk of breast cancer, heart attacks, and dementia.
Millions of women flushed their hormones down the toilet overnight. And the tragedy of that study is the methodology. It was tragically flawed.
Fundamentally flawed.
Because they were primarily looking to prevent heart disease, which typically affects older populations, they tested these hormones on women in their 70s and 80s.
Right.
Giving HRT to a 75-year-old is like trying to put premium petrol into a car engine that has been sitting dead in a garage for 10 years.
I love that analogy.
The fuel lines are cracked. The system has adapted to being shut down. You can't just dump gas into a degraded engine and expect it to run perfectly.
No, you can't.
You have to put the fuel in while the systems are still running.
That analogy perfectly illustrates the current consensus in neurobiology. Timing is absolutely everything.
Yes.
We now know that HRT is highly effective and protects the brain best if it is started during the perimenopausal transition.
Not a decade later.
Exactly. There is a critical 10-year window around the final menstrual period where the brain's estrogen receptors are still active, numerous, and waiting for that hormone fuel.
So if you stabilize the hormone levels during that specific window, the system doesn't shut down.
And the risks seen in the older demographic simply do not apply in the same way.
And the medical horizons are getting even brighter for women who are still worried about traditional HRT.
They really are.
Right now, there is a new designer estrogen in clinical trials called a neuroSERM.
Fascinating stuff.
It is essentially a GPS-guided estrogen.
Yeah.
When a woman takes it, the compound is designed to bypass the breast tissue and reproductive organs completely.
Sidestepping those historical cancer fears entirely.
Exactly, and travels straight across the blood-brain barrier to deliver fuel exactly where the neurons need it.
It is a highly targeted intervention that shows immense promise. But perhaps the most profound revelation from Dr. Mosconi's data is what happens naturally when a woman reaches the other side of this transition.
This is the best part.
For the vast majority of women, the brain adapts to its new environment. The brain fog lifts. The structural connectivity stabilizes, and cognitive function generally returns to premenopausal levels.
But it goes even deeper than just returning to normal.
It does.
The happiness U-curve. Studies consistently show that postmenopausal women in their 60s report the highest levels of life contentment and emotional well-being of any demographic.
It is a literal emotional renaissance.
And there's a measurable neurological mechanism driving this, right?
Yes. After menopause, the brain's amygdala, which is the emotional processing center, often associated with fear and stress,
Right.
literally rewires itself. It stops firing as severely in response to negative emotions.
Sadness, anxiety, anger, they simply do not hold the same neurological charge they used to.
Meanwhile, the amygdala continues to fire just as strongly for positive emotions and experiences.
Wow.
The result is a biological stabilization of joy, a state of mind that many women describe as emotional transcendence.
So let's bring this all together. We started by looking at a scary reality. A brain grid where the lights are browning out, ATP energy is crashing, and gray matter is physically vulnerable. We explored the evolutionary why behind the chaos, realizing it's a profound transition designed to build the ultimate resilient caregivers.
The grandmothers.
We learned how to mathematically prep our sleep and diets to protect our neurons, and finally, we arrived at this incredibly empowering truth. Menopause isn't an ending.
No.
It is a biological superpower paving the way for a happier, emotionally stable second act.
The brain is dismantling an outdated reproductive system to intentionally build a highly efficient, emotionally resilient architecture for the future.
Which brings us back to that city power grid we talked about at the very start.
Right.
The lights aren't dimming because the city is dying. They are browning out temporarily because the engineers are rewiring the entire grid to power up the best, most vibrant neighborhoods for the long haul.
Upgrading the system for its most important phase.
I want to leave you with one final thought to mull over, especially regarding that incredible detail about the amygdala.
Yeah.
If the postmenopausal brain naturally rewires itself so it processes negative emotions less severely,
Literally unlocking a biological state of emotional transcendence and unshakable joy.
could our society's absolute obsession with trying to stay forever young actually be holding women back from their peak emotional intelligence?
That's a great question.
What if those dim delights of aging aren't a sign of decline at all, but rather the human brain finally focusing all its energy on profound, unfiltered joy?
Something very much worth exploring.
Think about that the next time you look at the timeline of your own life. Thanks for taking this deep dive with us.